Tonight, we're going to sit with Dan McGowan and learn all things important in Rhode Island. Well, there's too many things, but how about how they're spending money in Providence and how many kids are taking tests and where the ed commissioner's been and all that kind of stuff. Welcome into my state of mind. I am Dan York. Pleasure to have you aboard. Thank you very much. I never take it for granted that you're watching. I hope you're spreading the news on the program. Seems like you are. Numbers reflect that, so thank you for that. Yeah, so Dan McGowan is in, hardly needs any introduction, stalwart journalist for WPR.com, and lately he's been throwing on jackets and doing like news, so wow, excellent. Like these online guys that get on the other side of the camera. Hey, if a fat guy can do it like me, anybody can do it, right? All right, let's go to the rundown because I got a lot going on here. Oh my gosh, you got to read this 260-page report. Do I have to really, Dan? If you want to have some fun, you'll read the report. We'll talk about it a little bit. I haven't read the whole report, just excerpts, but it's a goodie. Speaker Mattiello is playing this old, tired game, and it's really beneath him, but maybe not, because maybe he just is beneath it all. Session deadline, that's the key here when it comes to the Paw Sox deal, and it feels like they're racing to make it. You know, who's running the show here? Democrats are caucusing on the Paw Sox, so much for complete transparency. And I think a lot of people are going to be joining this church, at least for a sample session service or 2 or 10. Let's dig in. The Deflategate report is just too much. This came in the last hour of the radio show, Dan York, weekdays noon to 3 on WPRO, so I didn't get a chance to breeze through all of it. Here's the headline on it. The NFL report says the Pats likely did deflate the footballs, and this guy in the cap, you may know him, Brady, he, according to the report, most likely knew that they were being deflated, and there were 2 employees that most likely participated in the deflation of the footballs after the officials had inspected them. And so I am sure sports radio is going to be full of this conversation, and I would imagine even on radio tomorrow we'll be talking about it at least for an hour or so after everybody gets a chance to read the report. But I'll tell you one thing, one guy ain't going to make it, and one of those 2 employees who had his texts researched by these investigators, it is a laugh a minute to see how he's reacting to the pressure that he feels from Tom Brady to get the balls just right. The expletive deleteds strewn through this text conversation or conversations will make you laugh out loud. Now, Bob Kraft's not laughing out loud, but what are you going to do? Soon to be determined whether or not they're going to pay a fine. We're disappointed in its findings. We don't see any incontrovertible or hard evidence. Incontrovertible is a power word, don't you think? Blah, 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 blah. Just pop a couple part-timers, make Tom say, well, on second thought, and let's move on. All right, the next item, talk radio's fault. It always is, right? So I've been telling you the story of the rental property that House Speaker Nick Mattiello has with the Cranston Firefighter Union. I was the first to tell you on them, whatever. You know, but here's the thing. He's all flummoxed. He was asked by the press about this. I got a minute and a half's worth of audio here. Let me play it, and then let me straighten everybody out on it.
Your lease with the Cranston firefighters, should Rhode Islanders feel comfortable with that? You seem to have a comfort level.
Yes, they should. I'm a businessman. They've been tenants long before I was elected. The public's interest is to have qualified people running for office. What I hear on talk radio and so forth only discourages good people from running. You know, I've done everything that I've ever done has been to serve the public's interest. I'm not going to give up a private tenant in a difficult economy to serve someone's personal, mean-spirited agenda. They're good tenants. They've always been good tenants. They were my father's tenants long before I dreamed of running for the General Assembly. Where's the issue?
Those would be bad enemies. Those are the kind of people that call for boycotts. They've made it very clear that if you cross them, you will pay a price.
You are
right? Look at the way they behave.
Bill, what could the price be? That they leave me as tenants? Yeah. Who cares? Who cares? I've had business deals go well, and I've had business deals go bad. I've been in the business community a long time. I voted for pension reform. Is there an issue that would concern the Cranston firefighters more than pension reform? And I was a co-sponsor of the bill and a leading voice on the floor driving that bill through the House of Representatives. So if that didn't deter me, I don't have any idea what your question is or what your concern is.
I believe that, Nick. I believe that you don't have a clue about what's right or wrong. I really do. I believe you when you say that. First of all, if the tenancy and the rent is not that significant to you, then you can make a change, right? In terms of voting for pension reform, so did everybody and their brother who wanted to keep their seat. So if you think you're some kind of anti-conflict hero on that, you're missing something. Here's the question. I asked it yesterday, and I ask it again. Speaker, would you construct a lease deal with the Cranston Firefighter Union today from scratch if you had lease space available in your building? If the answer is no, because you've got some pending fire issues that you've got to manage in the house, then you must deconstruct the current lease at some amenable time. Make notice. You don't have to get sued. It could be a year from now where you put them on notice that it no longer, since you got caught not thinking straight, you got to let it go. Sometimes people have to rearrange their financial portfolios in order to be ethically clear to serve the people and run for office. And sometimes it doesn't always work out semantically and chronologically. His obstinance on this is unbelievable. Again, I tell you, there's a House Bill 5473 that is intended to completely deconstruct the kind of gains that North Kingstown made when they were able to, management rights-wise, reschedule their platoons. Investigate the bill. Mattiello's running it home. The lead firefighter union that's calling for this would be the Cranston Firefighter Union. So you don't want bank statements for campaign funding. You don't want an ethics commission. You don't want a subpoena hearing for 38 studios. And now this. What transparent and ethical leadership you provide, Mr. Speaker. We got a seat, Nikki. Weeknights, 7:30 and 11:30. Session deadline. WPRI.com headline. Yeah, watch this. This session deadline, they're going to make it. Even the governor's starting to talk that way.
Thursday, Governor Raimondo and the I-195 Redevelopment District Commission chairman met with principal Paw Sox owner Jim Skeffington and co-owner Boston Red Sox owner Larry Lucchino. You felt like it was constructive?
Yes, we've had constructive dialogue. We're at the table. They're open-minded. They're taking our suggestions, so we just have to work through it.
This as Rhode Island House Speaker Nicholas Mattiello announced that he's hired a consultant.
He's going to help frame the issues, give perspectives, let me know where the costs of the deal are, let me know where the benefits of the deal are, and some of those are hard to identify.
Right now, the proposal that they made puts all, the taxpayer has to come up with all the money, and we don't share in any of the profit or the revenue, and that's just not fair.
Watch this. The governor is going to take a second speed on this whole thing. Nick Mattiello has taken charge. The hiring of the consultant is the indication. He didn't need a consultant. Commerce RI just planned to spend $300,000 on consultants. One, to visualize the entire 195 corridor, and two, if it includes a stadium, 100.5 for one, 100.5 for another, to analyze how you go about transacting, the right deal for the stadium. This is about saying, when he takes over the negotiation here and runs it through the General Assembly, hey, I had my own consultant, which is why you see in the next move here a Democratic caucus. We got a headline on this. It just came up this afternoon. This transparent process to bring the Paw Sox in, I don't know. How about putting the Democrats in behind closed doors to construct what they're comfortable with the deal so they can make the deal on schedule with the Paw Sox? Now look, I'm still bullish on the stadium in Providence for the right deal. But don't tell me that the public will be there all step of the way. And don't tell me that this won't be done in private. The public will get a chance to react, scream, cheer, boo, hiss, applaud, and then they pass it. Just saying. That's how it's going to go. This is a pretty holy place. Did you check this out? I just had a laugh about this. Church that uses marijuana conducts services. Said, Jess, you got to get these people in here. And I want them to bring their 3 versions of worship. Marijuana in oil, kind of a marijuana drink, and then they smoke it. I just hope they bring brownies, because that would complete the spiritual experience. Your state of mind is important to us. Contact us at 228-1886, email, Facebook post, tweet, you know how to do it. Ken says on Facebook, the interview with Mr. Pitts Wiley were some of the best work and plain-spoken interviews I've seen and heard on a local level in a very long time. Sincere thanks. Yes, Ricardo Pitts Wiley was a pleasure to have on. Some pretty important conversation about race relations. The theater is the Mixed Magic Theater on Mineral Spring Avenue in Pawtucket. He's the co-founder of that, and you should check out shows there because they are deep, and I'm sure they are entertaining. All right, when we come back, Dan McGowan's got all sorts of stuff for us. Don't go anywhere. Stop. You're right. Here's I got a lot to cover with Dan McGowan. He's all over the place and doing some really good work. Here's his headline. We haven't talked about the park testing in a long time. This is the latest version of standardized tests, and we had this series of stories where parents were squawking about how unfair it was, and they wanted their kids to opt out. Welcome, kiddo. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
You've been doing some work on this. You know what we should do? Laura, if you play this little piece of Eyewitness News, it gives us a little bit of a flavor here real quick.
When it comes to the park exam, a lack of clarity around a Rhode Island Department of Education policy is causing a major headache for some school districts.
The fact that there is no law that says that parents can refuse their child's participation, but there's also no law that says that they can opt out. I mean, that contradiction is hard.
Narragansett Superintendent Kathy Sapala is the president of the Rhode Island Superintendents Association. She says the lack of clarity in the policy has not only led to anxious parents pulling their children out of park testing, in some districts it's rendering the testing almost useless.
When we lose students who are not taking that test, we're not getting the full picture of where our students are falling, where our school's falling. You need the full picture.
And so the big question is, why don't you just enforce it?
Right. Well, there's lots of moving pieces, right, with the park exam. One of the things that we wanted to do with this story was really, rather than, and you've had people on talking about park, and we've did so many interviews with parents and teachers and everyone who's upset with the test. We want to know, did students actually skip the test? What we found was basically right around 3,000 kids, across the state did in fact opt out. But about 80,000 kids took the test. Overwhelmingly, students in this state took the test. So I think sometimes we focus way too much on
the squeaky wheel.
Exactly. Then the flip side, though, there are things that are happening, and we talked to Kathy Sapala from Narragansett, who's also the head of the Superintendents Association, and I think there's a legitimate concern from superintendents in this state, and it's that they've had a real lack of clarity from the Rhode Island Department of Education around policy with the test. So the Department of Education says there's no opt-out. The state has absolutely no formal opt-out policy, but we'll let cities and towns kind of decide how they want to handle this. So states or cities and towns develop their own policies. They reach out to parents. They say, if you are going to opt out, we need to know. But then they hear that if there isn't 95% participation in these schools, there's a chance that their school classification ranking, could be dropped. In fact, if you fall under 95%, if you're a school like Narragansett High School, for example, which didn't, but if they did, they're a commended school. That's the highest ranking you can get. There are only 30 schools in the entire state that are considered commended schools. If they had fallen, say, 94%, they would not be eligible to be a commended school. Think about what that means if you're moving to Narragansett, things like that.
So are you suggesting there's a flaw in how the state's running this?
No, I think there's a flaw in the way it has been rolled out with two superintendents. So a lot of these superintendents didn't know whether there was some concern. In fact, I talked to several superintendents going back a couple of months ago who were saying, we're going to lose federal funding if we don't participate, things like that. Just wasn't true, but RIDE didn't tell them until after the test was taken. That's a big problem.
Why is that happening?
You know, I think it's I think there were a lot of moving pieces. That was one of the things that the Department of Education said to us. There were lots of things happening. There were lots of questions being asked, and they never got to that one. But that was the one when, you know, that was something that superintendents had to address with parents. I'll give you a great example. One was South Kingstown. I believe it was South Kingstown. They told parents, if you opt out, here's what can happen. People could lose their jobs. We could lose federal funding. That's a real scare tactic. That wasn't true. And if they had known that it wasn't true, they probably wouldn't have told parents that that was the case.
Yeah, you know what? I think the state got caught by surprise. The kneecap test was so controversial, and then the park test comes in behind it. I think people felt like it was fertile ground to really chew on it, and the activists come in.
Yep.
I think the state was surprised by the number of activists, even though it's only 3,000 out of 80,000 kids, or 3,000 versus 80,000 kids. That's still a lot. We covered it a lot. We talked about whether or not parents are making good decisions about opting out. I think they were just surprised that the momentum to opt out came out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think they were. I think you're right. The park, by the way, kind of snuck up on people. I remember I did a story maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the exam came out, and it blew up on our website. Everybody was clicking through. People wanted to know what was going on. They knew their kids. If you had kids, you knew you were taking the exam, but you didn't know anything about it. And I think, yeah, I think it allowed the activists to, you know, kind of just like how politics works, right? The activists kind of snuck up, and they took the issue, you know, and RIDE kind of stood back, and they got to dominate the issue. In some communities, Burrville, for example, 37% of kids opted out.
And so where there was a squeaky parent or 2 or 3 coordinating, it had an impact on the local district.
Undoubtedly.
But it wasn't statewide.
No, no.
Interesting. Meanwhile, we're on the education thing. You had this story on Deborah Gist as a headline here on WPRI.com, of course. She's been there and she's been here. We knew that was going to happen, didn't we?
We did. One of the interesting things is, you know, and this is very normal. And this is what her kind of excuse or explanation of this is, you know, whenever there's a transition, you know, it's good to be able to go to your next place and kind of phase yourself in. The issue that this story kind of stems from is, when she signed this contract consulting in Tulsa for you know, the couple of months leading up to her taking the job on July 1st, I said, well, how many vacation days do you have you accrued in Rhode Island? They refused to give it to us. We put in a public records request. They denied our public records request. So I wanted to know how many days is she now working there, and we found out 11 days since March 2nd. So, you know, roughly 2 school weeks. A couple of those days, I think 1 or 2 were during park days. And so I think it was just a good update to be able to say to people, okay, here's what she's doing. She still says she's, you know, doing her job here, getting through everything, and then kind of getting ready to hand off. But you know, she's getting paid $775 a day to work 11 days in another place.
It's good work if you can get it.
It's pretty good. I'll take it.
And by the way, she's high. You know, she's going to be in high demand. This is a big hit for Rhode Island. I know a lot of people have. The longer somebody's around, the more pot shots you can take. But it's going to be a very interesting process replacing her, don't you think?
It's going to be very difficult too. I think there's no question, and you and I have both talked to many people who have great opinions of Commissioner Gist, and also people who don't really like her. She was a firebrand. She came in and shook things up. She helped us, you know, bring that race to the top money, which was a huge, huge deal. Remember, that's right as the economy is collapsing, and we get $75 million. The commissioner did a lot of good work in this state, and so. Yeah, I think it's a tough role to follow.
Well, it'll be tough on the unions and their input in this process. I mean, they're going to have some. They can't pick on the next one too much, or people are going to just say, "Is that all you do? Is pick on the commissioner?"
Right. And the answer is yes. And if you think about it, going back, Peter McWalters was very similar. I mean, it's not a job.
It's not a job that everyone loves you in.
No, exactly.
No doubt. Change agency is not easy. When we come back, lots of numbers in Providence. No new taxes, but ... Stay with us. If you want to know what's going on in Providence city government, you got to read Dan McGowan daily at WPRI.com. Here's the headline on the budget presentation, which is, I mean, the headline matches my analysis. I mean, come on, man. There's no tax increases, but there's fees jumping all over Kingdom Come.
Across the board, licensing fees, business permits, things like that are all going up pretty significantly.
Yeah, I'm glad that you wrote it that way, because somewhere along the line, guys like Alorza, everyone's the greater fool. They think they can come in here and outsmart everybody. Well, people get that fees are money.
Sure.
So maybe we have to find a new word, tax fees or fee taxes, or because there's no difference to people between taxes and fees if the cost of living in a city or community, a state, a country for that matter, are rising.
Yeah, and that's where, I mean, the goal was to say, okay, look, you're right. You followed through. You were across the board. You said, going back to running against Buddy, you said, I'm not going to raise taxes my first year in office. True. However, here's how that happens, and it's increasing permits, it's increasing fees, it's tougher to do business.
How much total cash do they project they're getting from new fees? Do we know?
It's a couple of million. I'm not sure the exact number. I'd have to get back to you on it, but it is their way. There's no question. I mean, this is a very tight budget. I talked to Council President Aponte. He said in the years that he's been on the council, he's not sure that there has been a tighter budget than he's ever had to deal with. It's just very, little things that can happen would make a problem.
Speaking of Aponte, I didn't ask for a picture because I didn't think I'd be asking this question, but how does that guy keep his gig as the city council president, having $40,000 plus in fees and fines due to the Elections Commission for his inability to file quarterly reports over and over and over again?
Yeah.
Who would trust this guy with a $700 million budget on his side? He can't even file a report.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy, kind of tale of two people in some ways, right? On one hand,
pleasant enough to talk to,
very pleasant guy, and very strong politician, has really worked his way up. So is widely respected as like a policy guy and things like that. On the flip side, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've been covering this for a long time with him in particular, and he kind of just says, look, I'm working on it, I'm trying to get better. But you're right. I mean, when you see $40,000,
these guys seem to miss, and Alorza hasn't been critical because he's trying to get along and get his feet on the ground. This is embarrassing, and this is going to impact the kind of development they want to bring into the city when out-of-towners come in and say, wait a second, this guy can't count, he can't file his reports. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, this stadium proposal is in the city of Providence.
That's right.
No one's talking about their role. I got a couple of councilors coming in next week who are upset about that. But what's the mayor doing? Tell me, what's he doing behind the scenes? What's going on?
It's very interesting. In fact, both Aponte, the council president, and the mayor have had they've definitely been behind the scenes. When it comes, we're asking the governor, we're asking
behind
the speaker.
Behind the 8 ball or behind the scenes?
I would say behind the scenes. I think that they've certainly sat with Skeffington. They want to be involved. The question is, they're trying to figure out a way to not get steamrolled right after the legislature passes it and says, here's what we're doing. They go to the council, and the council says, no, we don't want to give you that tax break. They don't want to be the people that
so
are
what happens
blamed
at the
for
state,
the
you
mistake,
think,
right?
will leave a dangling participle with the city that'll have to be tidied up. So there will always, it's pay me now, pay me later. I'd be trying to make a deal with the city before I wanted a state deal.
Well, I think you're right. I think that's an approach that they haven't taken. In fact, I don't believe, at least as of right now, they haven't even hired a lobbyist in the city of Providence, which has its own process and everything. So there's no one at the council saying, pulling guys aside and give them a check, campaign contribution, things like that. It's not happening. It needs to, no question about it. Aponte said to me right after the proposal came out, he said, we need to be made whole here, whether that's in pilot payments or more money, elsewhere. It's got to happen somewhere.
All right, we'll keep following. WPRI.com. Got to read it. One more thing when we come back. Speaking of the City Council in Providence and the Paw Sox, we'll have Sam Zerier and maybe another for Friday's program to talk about that. He's a counselor from the East Side. A Brown philosophy professor who wrote an interesting op-ed piece in the Journal last week will join us. You won't want to miss that tomorrow at 7:30. I'll see you on the radio at noon on WPRO. Good night.